We're going to learn about self-management systems today. In order to develop tools for self-management, first we need to know what self-management is. There are many self-management skills that people are taught from an early age that we don't always realize we're doing, such as waiting our turn to speak or walking in the store versus running to get our favorite ice cream. Self-management is regulating your behaviors to meet the expectations in varying situations such as work, home, and in the public. Broad self-management tools decrease the need for behavior-specific teachings and can be used over multiple environments. When designing self-management tools, I remember the acronym, I did it. We are going to refer to this scenario throughout the rest of the presentation. The scenario is, Haley works at a secondhand store sorting donations. Frequently during her shift, Haley will leave her work area to find her supervisor, Josie, and talk about non-work related things. This behavior negatively impacts both Haley and Josie's work productivity. Josie has noticed this behavior occurs after 20 minutes of work. Haley is a non-reader and learns best from picture instructions. In order to successfully develop self-management systems, we as the support personnel need to make sure we do these 5 things before we can say, I did it. First, we need to define the target behavior. What is the behavior we are seeing? Do we want to encourage this behavior to continue, or do we wish to replace it with something that is more appropriate for the situation? Next, we need to work with the individual to select a reinforcer that works best for them. Ideally, the reinforcer will be tied to the target behavior. After a reinforcer is identified, a self-management tool needs to be designed. If we are looking to increase the duration of a target behavior, it would make sense to make tallies on a paper each time the target behavior is performed. But setting up a timer system would be appropriate. If we're looking to increase the frequency of a behavior, a tally system would be a more appropriate recording method. After we designed the self-management system, it is time to instruct the individual on how to use it. When the individual can demonstrate that they can perform the target behavior correctly and incorrectly when asked, and has demonstrated they can record the behaviors with the system put in place, it is time for the individual to be given more independence by increasing the time between prompts and reinforcers and allowing the self-management of their own behaviors. When we are identifying target behaviors, the individual who is learning to self-manage, as well as those who support them, must have a clear understanding of what the behavior is and what is expected. Target behaviors cannot be along the lines of the individual will act appropriately at work, because that does not give clear guidelines of what is appropriate and can be open to interpretation both by the individual and those observing. Rather than saying the individual will act appropriately at work, what appropriate is should be clearly defined, such as the individual will say good morning to staff prior to clocking in and will go directly to their work area following clocking in. In order to successfully find the why to the behavior, a functional behavior analysis should be performed. Without completing a functional behavior analysis, the root cause for the target behavior might be lost. Looking back at the scenario, without completing a functional behavior analysis, it would be easy to jump to conclusions about Haley and why she is seeking out Josie frequently during the shift. If that happens, it will be incredibly difficult to change the target behavior. Following the functional behavior analysis, we learn that Haley can perform the task with ease, but is lonely in her current location at work. She is seeking out Josie for friendship and company. When possible, having the individuals choose their reinforcer is shown to have greater results. However, guidance might be needed to choose one that is appropriate. When looking at reinforcers, having the reinforcer tied to the target behavior will be more sustainable in the long run. Looking at our scenario, we know that Haley is seeking out Josie to have conversation during the shift because she values that friendship. A logical reinforcer would be to set a time where Haley and Josie can speak, as long as Josie agrees to this, after a set amount of time. When identifying target reinforcers, it's best to have the individual choose their reinforcers. They're going to know what works best for them and what really motivates them. And choosing multiple reinforcers will decrease the chance that the individual will become dependent on a single reinforcer. When choosing a reinforcer, we need to know that there are 4 types of reinforcers. Positive reinforcements or reinforcers are the addition of a desired activity or item following the desired behavior. We get positive reinforcers all the time in the way of earning money for working. For individuals we support, a tangible item might be a better reinforcer. Negative reinforcers remove a negative stimulus when the desired behavior is completed to increase the chance that the behavior happens again. One example of this is a mom nagging her child to take the trash to the curb. When the child takes the trash to the curb, the nagging stops. The chances that child takes the trash to the curb the first time they are asked are increased because the nagging has stopped. Punishment is the addition of an adverse stimulus following an undesired behavior to decrease the chance it happens again. Spanking is an example of punishment. When a child is spanked following an undesired behavior, they associate the spanking with the behavior and will cease doing that behavior to avoid being spanked. And lastly, extinction is when the reinforcer for a negative behavior is discontinued. For example, if a child doesn't wish to eat their dinner, they throw a tantrum. As a result of this tantrum, their mom puts them in timeout and the child avoids eating their dinner. The reinforcer is the child being removed from the table and escaping the task they didn't wish to do, which is eating their dinner. For extinction, the mother would ignore the child's tantrum and continue to encourage them to finish their dinner. Most likely, the tantrums will initially increase when the child gets more and more upset. The increase in the tantrums is an example of extinction bursts and will decrease if not given the reinforcement they desire. In this case, if the mother continues to encourage the child to eat their dinner and does not remove them from the table, they will be more likely to eat it the first time. When designing self-management systems, it must always be clear to the individual what frequency or duration of a behavior is required to receive the reinforcer. Self-management systems must be designed with the individual in mind. If the individual is a non-reader and non-writer, a tool that requires them to read and write will not be successful. Circling smiley faces on a chart after each desired behavior is an option for non-reader if there's a clear distinction of how many smiley faces need to be circled to receive the reinforcer. Another option for recording frequency of a behavior is moving a small token from one pocket to another. If we're looking at increasing the duration of a behavior, things like kitchen timers, stopwatches, and alarm clocks are a great tool that can be used. So this is an example of a tracking duration of a behavior. The individual this was created for was struggling to complete her entire shift without being done early or asking to take a break. Her employment consultant determined that she would ask for a break or to go home every 20 minutes. Initially, a reinforcer was given after 15 minutes of continued work. Over time, the reinforcer was given after longer and longer durations, but this individual liked the satisfaction of filling in the 15-minute increments, so the lines indicating 15 minutes had passed stayed. This is a great way of setting up a tool that is successful for the individual with keeping their preferences in mind. So once we've identified the target behavior and the why, and the reinforcers have been identified and the self-management method has been created, it's time to start teaching the individual how to use the self-management system. The first step is to confirm that the individual knows exactly what the target behavior is and can demonstrate it when asked. They also need to demonstrate that they are able to track their behavior accurately every time, and that they can manage their reinforcer. If the individual is unable to demonstrate the ability to perform the correct behavior, and in this situation, the correct behavior being the behavior you wish to see, and when we're trying to increase the target behavior, correct behavior is the target behavior. When we're trying to decrease the target behavior, the correct behavior is an alternative and appropriate behavior or not demonstrating the target behavior. Using prompts should be given to the individual. When the individual shows the correct behavior, whether it's with prompts or without, the reinforcement should be given. Once the individual can demonstrate the difference between correct and incorrect behaviors, you can introduce the self-management method. Teaching self-management and independence. When the individual demonstrates they understand the correct and incorrect behaviors and are correctly tracking their behavior, it is time for the facilitator to offer less prompting, increase the individual's self-management, and go longer periods between the reinforcer. Let's look at our scenario one more time and break it down using I did it. Well, in this case, we did it. So first, we identified the target behavior, which is Haley leaving the work area to go talk to Josie after about 20 minutes of work. After doing a functional behavior analysis, it was discovered that Haley is lonely at work and is going to talk to Josie for the interaction and socialization. We identified that a good reinforcer for target behavior is Haley getting to take a few minutes to talk with Josie after Haley performs a set number of minutes of work. Designed a tracking tool for Haley to track her progress and how much time she's working, and set up a recording device so she knows when that 15 minutes is up. We confirmed that Haley understands what the correct and incorrect behavior is, and she's shown that she is able to properly record her behaviors. And then after a set amount of time, we slowly decrease the prompting and decrease the amount of reinforcements that are given throughout the shift. So gradually over time, we would increase the time between when Haley would get to go talk to Josie. So if it started at 15 minutes, we could bump it up to every 20 minutes and then every 25 minutes. And then ideally, Haley would just be checking in with Josie at the beginning of her shift and at the end of her shift.